The year was 1440, and in the remote countryside of Brittany, France, something unspeakable was happening behind the stone walls of Machecoul Castle. Children were disappearing, not one or two, but dozens, maybe hundreds, and the man responsible held one of the highest titles in medieval France. What you're about to hear is the story of Europe's first documented serial killer, a monster so depraved that the church and nobility conspired to erase him from history itself. His name was Gilles de Rais, and for centuries those in power have done everything possible to make sure you never learn the truth about what he did. Picture medieval France in the early 15th century, a land torn apart by war, plague, and superstition, where nobles lived like kings while peasants struggled to survive. In this harsh world, children often went missing, sometimes to disease, sometimes to bandits, sometimes they simply wandered into the forest and never returned. But in the villages surrounding Machecoul Castle, something different was happening, something that would haunt the nightmares of an entire generation. Gilles de Rais wasn't born a monster. In fact, he started life as one of France's greatest heroes. Fighting alongside Joan of Arc herself, he had helped drive the English from French soil. He was wealthy beyond imagination, cultured, intelligent, and blessed with everything medieval society could offer. But behind his noble facade lurked appetites so twisted that even today, scholars struggle to comprehend the depths of his depravity. The transformation began slowly. After Joan of Arc was burned at the stake in 1431, something broke inside Gilles de Rais that day. The woman who had inspired him to greatness was gone, and in her absence, darkness rushed in to fill the void. He retreated to his castle in Brittany, surrounded himself with sorcerers and alchemists, and began experimenting with practices that would make him the most feared name in medieval France. But what the history books don't tell you, what powerful people have spent centuries trying to hide, is the true scope of his crimes. Because Gilles de Rais didn't just kill a few children, he systematically murdered hundreds, turning his castle into a charnel house that would make modern serial killers seem tame by comparison. The pattern always began the same way. Gilles would send his servants into nearby villages, looking for children from poor families who wouldn't be missed, or who could be silenced with a few coins. The servants would approach desperate parents with offers of work, promising that their children would serve in the castle, learn valuable skills, maybe even earn enough money to lift their families out of poverty. What those parents didn't know was that they were selling their children to a living nightmare. Once inside Machecoul Castle, the children would be treated well at first, given good food, clean clothes, and comfortable quarters. Gilles understood the importance of gaining their trust, of making them feel safe, before revealing his true intentions. This psychological manipulation was part of what made him so dangerous. He wasn't just a killer. He was a predator who understood exactly how to exploit innocence and vulnerability. But then came the horror. In the castle's lower levels, Gilles had constructed what could only be described as torture chambers. Rooms specifically designed for the systematic abuse and murder of children. What happened in those chambers was so unspeakable that even the hardened judges who eventually tried him could barely bring themselves to record the details. The servants who worked in the castle later testified that they could hear screaming echoing through the halls, day and night, children crying for their mothers, begging for mercy that would never come. But Gilles had chosen his location carefully. Machecoul Castle was isolated, surrounded by thick walls and loyal servants who had been either bought or terrorized into silence. What made Gilles particularly dangerous was his intelligence and resources. He wasn't some deranged peasant acting on impulse. He was a sophisticated nobleman with virtually unlimited wealth and power. He could make people disappear, buy silence from witnesses, and use his influence to deflect any investigations. For years, he operated with complete impunity, protected by his title and the medieval world's reluctance to question the nobility. But the true horror of Gilles de Rais went beyond simple murder. According to the testimony given at his trial, he had developed an elaborate ritual around his killings. He would dress his victims in fine clothes, sometimes forcing them to participate in mock religious ceremonies before subjecting them to prolonged torture. The psychological torment was as important to him as the physical violence. He fed on their fear as much as their pain. The numbers are staggering. Conservative estimates suggest Gilles de Rais murdered over 140 children, but some historians believe the true count may have exceeded 600. To put that in perspective, he may have killed more people than any serial killer in recorded history. And he did it all from the comfort of his own castle, with the protection of medieval law and custom. What's even more chilling is how long he got away with it. From approximately 1432 to 1440, Gilles de Rais operated without interference. 8 years of systematic murder. 8 years of children disappearing into his castle never to be seen again. 8 years of parents wondering what happened to their sons and daughters, while one of France's most respected nobles satisfied his monstrous appetites in the shadows. The local population began to notice the pattern. Too many children were vanishing, always from poor families, always after being recruited for work at the castle. Whispers began spreading through the villages. Parents started warning their children to stay away from Gilles de Rais and his servants. But whispers weren't enough to stop a man with his power and influence. What finally brought Gilles down wasn't his murders. It was politics. In 1440, he made the fatal mistake of kidnapping a priest during a property dispute. This wasn't a poor child who could disappear without consequence. This was a member of the clergy, someone whose disappearance would be investigated by the church itself. The Duke of Brittany, who had been deliberately ignoring rumors about Gilles for years, suddenly found himself facing pressure from religious authorities. An investigation was launched, and for the first time, someone with real power began looking closely at what was happening in Machecoul Castle. What they found defied belief. Hidden chambers filled with the remains of children, rooms stained with blood that no amount of scrubbing could remove. Servants who broke down and confessed to participating in horrors that haunted their dreams. The evidence was so overwhelming that even Gilles' noble status couldn't protect him. The trial that followed was unprecedented in medieval history. Never before had a nobleman of such high rank been publicly accused of such monstrous crimes. The church and secular authorities worked together to build a case that would ensure Gilles could never escape justice. But they also had another goal: to control the narrative and minimize the scandal that could damage the entire feudal system. Gilles eventually confessed, but even his confession was carefully managed. The authorities made sure that only certain details became public. The full scope of his crimes, the exact number of victims, the specific methods he used. Much of this information was sealed away, never to be revealed to the general population. On October 26th, 1440, Gilles de Rais was executed. But his death marked the beginning of an even more insidious crime: the systematic erasure of his story from history. The church and nobility recognized that Gilles' crimes posed a threat to the entire social order. If one nobleman could commit such atrocities, what did that say about the nobility as a whole? The cover-up began immediately. Records were destroyed, witnesses were silenced, and the few accounts that survived were deliberately vague about the details of his crimes. Over the centuries, Gilles de Rais was gradually transformed from a serial killer into a footnote in French history, mentioned briefly as a companion of Joan of Arc who went astray, but never identified as the monster he truly was. This historical whitewashing had devastating consequences. By hiding the truth about Gilles de Rais, authorities missed crucial opportunities to understand the nature of serial killing. Patterns that might have helped identify future monsters were ignored. Warning signs that could have saved lives were forgotten. The lessons that should have been learned from Europe's first serial killer were buried along with his victims. Modern historians who have attempted to research Gilles de Rais often find themselves hitting walls. Key documents remain sealed in church archives. Important records have mysteriously disappeared, and access to crucial evidence is restricted. Even today, more than 500 years after his death, powerful institutions continue to protect the secrets surrounding his crimes. But some evidence has survived, hidden in monastery libraries and private collections. And what these sources reveal is terrifying. Gilles de Rais wasn't just a killer. He was a pioneer of systematic murder. His methods, his psychology, his ability to maintain a respectable public image while committing atrocities in private. All of these elements would reappear in serial killers throughout history. The victims of Gilles de Rais were more than just statistics. They were children with names, families, dreams. Young boys who should have grown up to become farmers, craftsmen, soldiers. Instead, they became the forgotten casualties of one man's monstrous appetites. Their families never learned what happened to them, never received closure, never saw justice for their murdered children. What makes this story even more tragic is how it could have been prevented. The signs were there from the beginning. Gilles' increasingly erratic behavior after Joan of Arc's death, his obsession with occult practices, his gradual withdrawal from normal society. But the medieval world's deference to nobility meant that no one dared investigate a man of his status until it was far too late. The legacy of Gilles de Rais extends far beyond his own crimes. He established a template for how powerful predators could operate with impunity, how they could use their status and resources to silence victims and witnesses, how they could maintain respectability while committing unimaginable atrocities, and perhaps most importantly, how those in authority would choose to cover up rather than confront the uncomfortable truth about evil in their midst. This pattern would repeat itself throughout history, powerful men committing terrible crimes while institutions looked the other way, victims silenced by fear, money, or force, evidence destroyed to protect reputations. The story of Gilles de Rais wasn't just about one medieval monster. It was about a system that prioritized image over justice, power over truth. Even today, we can see echoes of this dynamic. When powerful people are accused of terrible crimes, there's often a rush to protect institutions rather than seek justice, to minimize scandals rather than confront uncomfortable truths. The erasure of Gilles de Rais from history represents an early example of how those in power will go to extraordinary lengths to protect themselves, even if it means allowing evil to flourish in the shadows. The children who died at Machecoul Castle deserve to be remembered, not as nameless victims of a forgotten monster, but as human beings whose lives mattered, whose deaths should have taught us important lessons about the nature of evil and the importance of justice. Instead, their sacrifice was wasted, their stories buried, their killer transformed from a cautionary tale into a historical footnote. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of this story is what it suggests about other cases that might have been covered up. If someone as notorious as Gilles de Rais could be largely erased from history, what about lesser nobles who committed similar crimes? How many medieval serial killers have been completely forgotten, their victims denied even the possibility of historical justice? The truth about Gilles de Rais reminds us that evil doesn't always look like the monsters in fairy tales. Sometimes it wears the finest clothes, speaks with cultured voice, and hides behind titles and respectability. And sometimes, those who should protect us from such evil choose instead to protect the evil itself. The next time someone tells you that the powerful can be trusted to police themselves, remember Gilles de Rais. Remember the children who died in his castle, and remember how centuries of authorities chose silence over truth, because the monsters they tried to erase from history have a way of returning when we least expect them. If stories like this leave you questioning what other dark secrets lie hidden in history's shadows, Subscribe to the Grey Hour for more investigations into the crimes that powerful people never wanted you to discover. Because sometimes the most important truths are the ones that someone tried very hard to bury.